Winter hunt, the chase for the elk. Jason squinted against the biting wind, his breath forming clouds in the frigid mountain air. Snowflakes fell in a relentless curtain, painting the dark pines white. Every step forward sank them deeper into the thick snow, but he and Ben kept pushing on, rifles slung across their backs. The hunt wasn't over, not yet. "Do you see anything?" Ben asked, his voice barely carrying over the howling wind. He was shorter than Jason, stocky, but built for endurance. His face was flushed, and ice clung to his beard. "Not since we lost that last trail," Jason muttered, wiping the frost off his rifle's scope. Hours earlier, they'd been tracking a massive bull elk. Its prints had been clear at first, leading them deeper into the Rockies, but the blizzard was closing in fast, erasing any trace of the animal. Jason could still feel the adrenaline pumping through him from when they'd first spotted the beast, a trophy elk, bigger than any they had ever seen. "I don't like this," Ben muttered, glancing around nervously. "This storm, and those wolves." Jason nodded. They had heard the howls not long after the first snowflakes began to fall. The wolves were out there, circling, close enough to feel but too far to see. "We stick to the plan," Jason said firmly. "We get the elk and we get out." Ben grunted in agreement, though Jason could see the unease in his eyes. They pressed on, moving quietly through the trees. The silence between them stretched long, broken only by the occasional crack of a branch underfoot or the shriek of the wind. Then Jason froze, holding up a hand. Ben halted beside him, following his gaze. Through the thickening snow, something moved, big, silent, and powerful. "The elk. There," Jason whispered, pointing toward the shadowy figure about 100 yards ahead. "It's grazing." Ben slowly reached for his rifle, careful not to make any sudden movements. They crouched low, moving as one. The wind swirled around them, masking their scent but making visibility nearly impossible. Jason got his rifle to his shoulder, peering through the scope. His heart pounded in his chest. He could just make out the elk's broad antlers swaying like the branches of a great oak. This was it. Everything they had worked for, through hours of tracking and fighting the storm. But something didn't feel right. The wind shifted, carrying a low growl on the breeze. Jason felt the hairs on his neck stand up. He glanced at Ben, who was now scanning the area with wide eyes. "Did you hear that?" Ben asked, gripping his rifle tighter. Jason barely nodded. He was already turning his head, searching for the source of the sound, when the growl turned into a snarl. Then they saw them. 3 wolves, dark silhouettes against the white snow, slipping between the trees like shadows. "They're stalking us," Jason said, his voice tight. "They've been watching us the whole time." Ben's eyes widened as the wolves spread out, circling, their yellow eyes glowing in the fading light. One of them let out a sharp bark, and suddenly, the elk bolted. "Damn it!" Jason cursed, rising to his feet. "Go! After it!" They took off at a dead sprint, snow flying up around their legs as the wolves charged after the elk, their lean bodies cutting through the storm like knives. Jason's heart pounded in his ears as they raced through the trees, the sound of snapping branches and heavy breathing all around them. Ben was falling behind, his boots struggling to find traction in the deep snow. "They're getting closer, Jason!" Jason didn't respond. His focus was on the elk. He could just see it up ahead, leaping over logs and crashing through the underbrush. The wolves were closing in, but Jason wouldn't let them take it. Not when they were this close. He raised his rifle as he ran, aiming for the lead wolf, a massive gray beast with a scarred muzzle. Just as he pulled the trigger, a sudden blast of wind threw him off balance and the shot went wide, ricocheting off a tree. "Jason!" Ben shouted. "It's turning!" Jason swung his head just in time to see the wolf dart toward him, teeth bared, eyes blazing with hunger. He raised his rifle again, but it was too late. The wolf lunged, and Jason felt its hot breath on his arm, its teeth closing around his jacket. With a savage roar, Ben fired his rifle, the shot booming across the mountain. The wolf let out a yelp and dropped into the snow, blood spreading in a dark stain around it. The other 2 wolves hesitated, then backed off, slinking into the shadows. "You okay?" Ben panted, running up to him. Jason nodded, shaking off the shock. "We need to finish this." The elk had slowed, confused by the wolves' retreat. It stood at the edge of a small clearing, steam rising from its massive body. Its antlers gleamed in the faint light, majestic and proud. This time, Jason didn't hesitate. He brought the rifle to his shoulder, steadying his breathing. The storm howled around him, the wind tugging at his clothes, but everything else fell silent. He fired. The shot rang out, echoing through the valley. The elk staggered, its legs buckling beneath it. Jason and Ben rushed forward as the great beast fell to the ground, its life slipping away into the cold. For a moment they just stood there, breathing heavily, watching the snow swirl around the fallen elk. "We did it," Ben whispered. Jason nodded, wiping the sweat and snow from his brow. "Yeah, we did." But as they stood there, the distant howl of wolves echoed through the storm once more, reminding them that the hunt wasn't the only thing lurking in the woods. They still had a long way to go before they were safe. Jason slung his rifle over his shoulder and grabbed the elk by the antlers. "Let's get out of here." Together they dragged their prize through the snow, their eyes scanning the tree line, knowing the wolves weren't far behind. The storm raged on, but they had what they came for, and they were going to make it out alive.